Titled Identifying Key Enablers for Mission Success. Before we start, we're fortunate enough to have in the audience several of tomorrow's leaders and their cadre who are now part of the junior and senior ROTC programs from across the great state of Hawaii. I'd like to take a moment this morning to recognize those cadets, so please stand and be recognized as I mention your school. Farmington High School, Kamukui High School, Kapolei High School, McKinley High School, St. Louis High School, go ahead and stand up, Roosevelt High School, Waipahu High School, and Aiea High School. Let's have a round of applause.
Where's Farrington? All right. There we go. I haven't been gone that long.
It's now my pleasure and honor to introduce this morning's moderator, Lieutenant General retired Robert Shea, who currently serves as President and CEO of AFCEA International.
Well, thank you very much. This morning's panel, the theme is named Identifying Key Enablers for Mission Success. We may drift away from that a little bit to kind of bring the currency of the topic of information into the discussion. We're missing someone. I'm not sure where he is. Vice Air Marshal Andrew Dowse is supposed to be with the panel. He's from Australia, so hopefully we'll get Andrew in here before we're finished with the introductions. But I'll highlight some of his career, so when he comes in, we can move right into, get him engaged quickly in the panel. You know where he's coming from. He's been 36 years in the Australian Air Force and the Australian military. He was a Director General of Integrated Capability Development and the Director General of Capability and Plans, and then was later the Director of General Strategy and Planning for the Australian Air Force. He has served as the strategic J6 out here, so he's General Friedenberg's counterpart in Australia. He's got a PhD and a technical PhD, so he's well-rounded, and he certainly has a proficiency in the technical skills. And then next to me, or one down, is Anita Abbott. She's the Director and Adjunct Professor of Global Partnership and Development at Charisma University, and she comes from New Zealand. Considers herself a progressive educator. She's well steeped in vocational training and teaching, both face-to-face as well as doing distance learning. She got that experience. She's got a PhD in political science and public policy, and she's done a lot of writing and editing, and she's the associate editor for the International Journal for the Humanities. So she brings a little bit different perspective on what's going on as we get into this world of information. And next to her is retired Brigadier General In-Sub Shin from Korea. He's got 15 years of experience working in the cybersecurity domain, from a practitioner to strategy. He's a system engineer in C4I Systems. He's taught C4ISR architecture courses for AFCEA, and quite frankly, he is well steeped. He's been in front of AFCEA for a long time. He currently works at George Mason University part-time as a director of the cybersecurity architecture branch. So he's got a tremendous understanding of how information flows, the challenges about that. He's also held position as a secretary to the president for cybersecurity in Republic of South Korea. And he also was the director of research and development for the Korean Cyber Command. And then next to him down the end, last not least, is I was talking to General Friedenberg before, and this is a gentleman that has operational experience that is eye-watering. He's certainly served at the tactically operational level as well as being in a strategic position. He's currently the Director of Command Control, Communication and Cyber for the United States Pacific Command. He's got experience during Operation Just Cause in the Republic of Panama. He was a Communication Electronics Officer for the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group, Fort Bragg. He participated in Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti. He was the S3 Plans and Exercise Officer for the 3rd Psychological Operations Dissemination Battalion, the 4th PSYOP Group at Fort Bragg. He's been he served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was an action officer on the Joint Staff in Washington in the J6. Bottom line is he's also been the commander of the 1st Signal Brigade in Korea and was the J6 U.S. Forces Korea, among other things, over there. And he's just currently come into the Pacific Command. He's been here about 3 months. His previous job before coming here was he was the commandant of the Dwight Eisenhower School for National Security and Resource Management. So we've got a very diverse panel. When the Air Marshal gets here, we'll have representatives from New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, as well as the United States. So we're coming at it from a lot of different areas in what is truly a challenging environment here, and we've got several topics to take, and we may drift off that topic just a little bit as we go forward, because certainly the world that we're in now, we certainly understand the importance of mission success, and really, when you think about it, no matter what your occupation is, what profession you are, the key to what success is the mission, right? The mission takes overwhelming priority over what's going on. You need good people, you need technology, you need procedures, you need good tactics and all that thing to make the mission successful. But the bottom line, it's about the mission, and we all need to focus on the mission as we go forward. So that is what the key focus is going to be here right now. The theme is resiliency keeps coming up, and we'll talk about that. But if you look at some of the incidents that recently happened in the United States Navy out here in this theater, you read some of the suppositions that some people make or the innuendo of why some of these happen. But the fact of the matter is we're now living in a world where we can consider that cyber is a factor in what goes on, whether it was or not. And the fact that we have to consider it really is something that gets inside our head, and it can play games with you as you go forward. So really the real question is, how do you effectively operate a network that's been kludged together over time? It includes space, it includes terrestrial pieces, it includes the infrastructure that goes on. But the bottom line, the network really is about decision-making, command and control, and the ability to focus allow the director or the leader or the commander to focus on the mission and enable the mission. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to turn it over to each one of our panel members. They'll talk for about 8 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Anita. You can start off, okay? Hollywood producer, too.
Okay, so I'm the director of Global Partnership and Development, and Polintel is the division. Cyber warfare, cyber terrorism, lesson learned. That's a big topic, but I want to highlight that it is essential to learn from what happened, to learn from cyber attacks that are conducted by non-state actors and state actors, in order to define what is resilience for cyber security, or what is cyber terrorism, and to develop a model of a threat model for cyber resilience, for example. And of course, we have to be prudent to distinguish the difference between cyber warfare and cyber terrorism. Think about this.
That's okay.
Sorry, I can't hear. The scenario of Malaysian Airlines website postulates that Malaysian Airlines website had been hacked by a group calling itself the Cyber Caliphate. Is it valid? Is it overestimated or something like that? How about this one? Russian hackers penetrated Ukraine's power grid and struck out electricity for 225,000 people. Well, the counter-arguments of this claim is that, well, there are many other things that can cause the destruction. Raccoon, or birds, or squirrel, not cyber terrorists. But others also said, well, this is cyber espionage for economic purposes, not cyber warfare. Some may say that. How about this one? Access to Facebook on a long flight has the potential to put passengers in the crosshair of terrorists and hackers. The counter-argument of this, well, we are well equipped, but the Government of Accountability Office has indicated that there are vulnerabilities in the system. So, sorry. What is it? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. There you go.
So in order to develop a model, we need to observe and to understand what the definition of a term, for example, what is cyber terrorism, what is resilience, okay? And after that, we need to develop or formulate hypotheses. For example, whether cyber terrorism is a legitimate threat. And after that, we need to have full analysis, and then we can come up with a new definition. And remember, the new definition is the end product of analysis. And it is also important to remember that maybe political motivation can be argued. We can argue that there is boundary, but it is foolish, or maybe I should not say that. It would be misleading if we draw boundaries before full analysis. And after that, we can develop a framework of analysis. The framework to analyze whether counter cyber terrorism is effective or not, or we can develop a model of threat models for cyber resilience. And in terms of cyber warfare, think about what happened earlier. Moonlight Maze, Titan Rain, Red October, Shamoon, Stuxnet, Mars, and Snakes, cyber attacks, okay? Cyber warfare. How about Shodan? We know Google and Bing, we can use them for many benefits. But how about Shodan? Shodan certainly can facilitate cyber terrorism and cyber warfare because it searches the vulnerability of devices. General Keith Alexander said that the effect of cyber weapon is comparable to the effect of weapons of mass destruction. Now, when we talk about cyber terrorism, we need to take this into account when we develop a model. Shumak al-Islam Jihadist Forum mentioned that, or they have planned, or they mentioned that they have the ability, they will have the ability to hack planes or airplane systems using Android smartphone. Is that valid? Is it true? But we need to be vigilant and watchful. How about Al-Batar Media? Al-Batar Media exposed the details of Italian, French, American, and English military personnel. For what? The target. Al-Qaeda and the Tunisian cyber army also mentioned that one day they would do something with the Pentagon and Department of Defense. How about Eunice Dessoli? He is the cyber jihadist. He used several methods like, what do we call that? Stealing information of credit card and so on in order to fund the terrorist activities. How about Junaid Hussain, the founder of Cyber Caliphate? How about I think his name is Al-Anwar al-Awlaki? He mentioned that cyber terrorism is creative terrorism. And not only hacking, they use different kind of tactics and cyber weapons. And also cryptography. Remember what Osama bin Laden did, Larry and Yusuf before the attacks. Okay? So all of this need to be taken into account. It is okay to say, well, we are well equipped. Terrorists have to find vulnerabilities of our system, and our system is multiple systems. So, and we are well equipped, fine, if we say that, but we also need to be aware of this. Yes. Alan Peller says, the internet is simply not ready. We are not ready to withstand a major attack. And you can see, you can read. And I like this one from Israeli Defense Force. We need to be ready for the knife in the hand of the terrorist, just like we must be ready for a terrorist to hack in a computer. We must be ready for both the strategic and tactical threats. You can read this, but I just want to say this briefly. So in terms of the current countermeasures, in terms of the strengths and vulnerabilities, for cyber terrorism, we need to know the targets, their motivation, the method of action, impact, and the use of cyber weapons. And we need to remember the difference between cyber attacks and physical attacks. And also, the computer networks do not operate aircraft remotely. Yes, it's okay, it's fine, it's valid, but we need to be vigilant too. And one thing that we need to remember is now, state actor and non-state actor may work together, okay? For example, North Korea and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they work together, so non-state actor can work together with state actor. The last one. So in order to develop a framework for analysis, safe analysis for countering cyber terrorism, we need to know, or we need to identify what the future threats are. And then we need to have strategic intelligence and resilience and open source intelligence. And most importantly, we need to know the legal developments and defensive and offensive capabilities. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
All right. I'd like to add one more comment to the introduction of Bob. In the bottom line, there's a Korea Defense Information Communication Associations. Actually, I've worked with the AFCR for a long time, but NICA is another version, Korean version of AFCR. Okay, I work for that, and also I'm visiting scholar to George Mason University. So today's presentation is prepared by both countries. Okay, coalition partners. Today, the theme of this conference is cyber operations for mission assurance and resilience. And the topic of today is identifying, the key enablers for mission success. If somebody have some answers, what is key enablers to some program solvers? It is perfect, but it's not easy. So today, I'm not talking about what is key enablers for mission success. I'll talk about how to identify the key enablers for mission success. And my conclusion is already over there. Okay? Architecture-based system engineering approach is the one solution. That's my statement. Then, how can you identify the key enablers? I'm going to talk about this from problem definition, then challenges, and what's the solution for these challenges. Now, problem. Okay? Let's make the problem simple. Okay? The principles. Course of actions must be taken in those of opportunity in the cyber battlefield through uncertainty and time domain. Okay? See the pictures on the right side. There's two limitations. In uncertainty, you have a acceptable level of uncertainty. It is generated by a fog of war usually, and sometimes it's determined by the capability of decision making, and sometimes the level of trainings. Okay? And another limitation is you have time available to make a decision, so to take course of actions. Usually, this time determined by force abilities. Now, then what's the effect of cyber threats? It narrows the induced opportunity through uncertainty line and timeline. Then, what is the purpose of operations? You can widen induced of opportunity by information assurance through uncertainty line, and widen induced opportunity system resilience through timeline. Then cyber operations can support mission success at force level. So in cyber battlefield, you have a problem of complexity. Okay? Cyber operations actually must be conducted across all three layers: system layer, information layer, and force layer. So remember, what's the problem of this cyber battlefield? One point is complexity. Okay? Now here, we had a title is the resilience. Let's talk about resilience first. Okay? The definition of resilience usually depends on the domain. Everybody has their own definition of what is resilience, depending on the circumstances. And the systems or software and civil networking materials, everybody has their own definitions. But one common sense is this. It includes avoidance, survival, recovery, and disruptions. So resilience meaningful only if we consider the resilience of what and to what and under what conditions. So you can say resilience is the ability to avoid, survive, and recover from disruptions. Now let's back to complexity problem. Okay? You have three big challenges in cyber battlefield for cyber operations. One is complexity and uncertainty. Usually, through all three layers, from system to force level, you have each element and connected, and it's a dependency. Okay? Because this dependence and connectivity, the cause and effect relations across all of this domain makes the uncertainty increase. Yeah. Furthermore, from system level to force level, the elements includes organizations, and process, system, equipment, force, even in people. Okay. Usually nowadays, the biggest challenge is about people is the insider threat. Okay. Or you can think about the psychological perspective too. Now, next challenge is inferences. Okay. The inferences by cyber operations can be modeled by some logically. And also, you can have some AI technology to information fusions, or you can the subject matter experts can intervene in the process of the AI technologies. But the problem is here, because of the dependency and also connectivity through the all complexity, it is the effects of events is not controllable. The meaning of uncontrollable here, I'm saying, is there is a chain of events. One event causes another event, and these events also cause another event. Then the effects of events after second events, you cannot actually control. It means you cannot prevent the occurring of another event by one event. Okay? Then, what can you do? You must think about the risk then. Okay? Unpredictable events, but you can predict some effects of this. Okay? So the risk must be manageable within windows of opportunity. What I'm saying is within the time and within uncertainty given to you. Okay? Now, next challenge is resilience over time. Forget about some mathematics over here, but as I said, the resilience is the ability to avoid and survive and recovery from the disruptions. Suppose you can think about the survival phases. If you have a narrow length of the survivals, it means you have a short time to make decisions and to take course of actions. Okay? So there are 3 big challenges in cyber battlefield. Then, what are the solutions? Unfortunately, there's no absolute solution for cybersecurity. It's just common, actually. And also, security is not product, but process. It's a well-known phrase also. In the market currently, but you have 2 frameworks. One is cybersecurity framework, the other is risk management framework. But it's not concrete yet. It's not also detailed enough. Then, what's the problem? You can think of it in 2 perspectives. One is engineering view. If focus on protection and detection, then what combination of technology and policies will produce the desired level of security? Well, and can you measure and compare it? Not easy. Now, there's another view, operational view. You focus on responses. Once threat is detected or evidence of crimes collected, do you have time and option to respond it? Big challenge. And can you track the past and expect effects of the future events? Not easy. Then what can you do? Here is, I can bring the architecture concept. Okay? Architecture-based system engineering approach is another solutions. Okay? Then what is architecture-based system engineering means? I have 2 types of solutions. One is engineering perspective. Architecture-based cybersecurity engineering. Okay? You can develop large attack scenario, and you have some continuous plan already. Now you have this architecture, either some executable format, executable model. Then using this contingency model and architectures, you can predict risks. Once you got the probability of the predicted risks, now you can make decisions. Okay. Given some security policy, can you accept the performance of this system given this attack scenario? If you can accept it, just let it go. Otherwise, you can think redesign, or you can change security policy also. So this is the engineering perspective. Second perspective is operational view. Okay, now you got evidence of actual cyber threat or events, and you have the same contingency model and external models using AI technology and whatever. Okay. Then you can expect what's the effects of this cyber threat or events after events. Then now you can make decisions. It is windows of opportunity in this case, for example, in those response. For example, if you have length time to make a course of actions and decisions, then you can wait until you prove the attributes of attack. For example, who is attack? But if you have just narrow windows of opportunity, you have no time, then you have to immediately warn and upgrade input conditions. Okay? So there are two types of solutions. I like to say, identifying key enablers for mission success is possible, specific to the mission and the circumstances of the force. You cannot say, this is key enablers for these organizations. You cannot say that. Okay? And desired level of cybersecurity for mission success stands at the desired level of resilience of the force. If you want to say the level of resilience, then you have to measure, must be able to measure the attributes of resilience. And also, it is a time domain to make restrictions of your decision making. The attribute resilience over time also affect key cybersecurity engineering factors in risk analysis. Resilience capability affects the endorsed opportunity for timely response against cyber threats. And in the real time, during the operations, risk management is possible when security manager or some cyber warrior is well trained to security process. Learning about skills or operating the products is not enough. So all security products must run on resilient architecture at force level. In that case, you can do in real time something to respond. Currently, the Trump administration's announced a cybersecurity policy. The basic theme of this policy is actually risk-based cybersecurity. But it is not enough. As I said, the security framework and also risk management framework is a concept and just a description. It's not implementation strategy. So it must be enhanced by some, I like to say, that is architecture-based system engineering. Okay? So if you can say this is key enablers, it's perfect, but nobody can say that. Believe in me. Okay? So you have to start from the operational concept to identify key enablers who was disablers for mission success or failures. That's my conclusion. Okay?
Thank you. I'm going to bring it back to this end of the table, and Andrew Dowse has now had the opportunity to catch up with us. So, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you. I've already done the introduction.
Thanks, sir. And first of all, can I apologise? I'd like to say I'm on a different time zone, but frankly, I was in my own world thinking that I was on a 10:15 panel and busily ordering a Starbucks while General Shea was wondering where I was. When we think about mission assurance and resilience, immediately our thoughts go to the availability of our information, availability of our systems. Being an old ComSec guy, I also think about confidentiality and integrity. Throw into the mix the need for relevance of information and timeliness of information. And you've got a problem where you need to, I think, deliberately think about your critical information exchange requirements and ensure that your systems are designed to be fit for purpose. And sometimes I wonder if we do that or we just incrementally change our systems. So if you do that, you would think about not only what your information exchange requirements are, but what the vulnerabilities are those to your systems are. And you would set about understanding what levels of hardening and what levels of redundancy you need for your systems. That's all very easy to say, but as we all know, there are trade-offs trade-offs between the availability and accessibility of information and the security of our information, and frankly, trade-offs between how much resilience can you afford, and that's a key one for us. Also, we need to think about in the design of our systems, quite often the technical systems are quite fit for purpose. It's the humans that can be the problem. And one of the key sort of requirements we have in ensuring mission assurance and resilience is to look at the behaviour of our people, how much risks they're willing to take. Knowing that our information systems are a centre of gravity for us in almost every mission we undertake, we must understand that an adversary will understand the same and would seek to target our information systems. Whereas there's been some changes in the recent past with days without space, days without cyber, I still remain concerned that we don't fully integrate cyber and mission assurance into our training. I've lost track of the number of times when we've tried to inject cyber activities into a proper field training exercise whereby commanders will say, don't mess with my exercise, don't mess with my training objectives. And really, we need to be realistic. As the Marines say, sir, we need to train like we will fight. The other consideration I would pose there is that it needs to be more than just cyber. We need to understand that where cyber exploits against our systems are difficult or not possible, an adversary will resort to physical or electronic warfare attacks against our systems to achieve the same effect. And so therefore we do need to train and ensure that we are able to fight without the systems that we expect we will have. Another fundamental sort of concern I have, and this is both within the communicators and the non-communicator communities, is I think that we still in our mindsets are thinking that we are dealing with standalone systems or discrete networks. I think we sometimes forget that we have such a huge level of integration within our communication systems. And I think when that's the case, when we have that mindset, we sometimes are willing to take risks locally that can have strategic effects. And I think the environment has significantly changed, and our doctrine and our processes need to change to understand the proliferation of risks with the proliferation of threats throughout our systems. I would characterise the change to the environment as we further integrate our systems as being about greater reach and greater depth of our technology. In terms of reach, the downside of greater connectivity and seamless integration of services is, as I said, is that it proliferates risks, and tactical mistakes can have strategic effects. This is why we've moved beyond the simple idea in our network defence of perimeter defences and need to have cybersecurity mechanisms that can detect and contain threats throughout the environment. In terms of depth, consider the integration of our weapons systems into the IT environment. In the last 10 years, it's been a significant change. Cyber threats, therefore, are not just threats against our command and control systems, but can disable major platforms, thus being a significant threat to mission assurance and a massive capability and financial cost if those threats are realised. In Australia, we had a white paper, a strategy, if you like, last year, in which there were hundreds of references to cyber. It was quite refreshing to see. Looking to enhance our ability to preserve our capability and preserve our ability to undertake missions. We are progressing those changes from that strategy primarily through the standing up of an information warfare division, a sister division to mine. which is looking at improving the awareness of cybersecurity throughout our force, enhancing our cybersecurity capabilities, improving the resilience of our communications and IT systems, and developing the ability to respond to threats in cyberspace. We really recognise that cybersecurity is a challenge, and it's one that we share with our closest allies. And as with all shared challenges, the best approach, I think, is to enhance our mutual cooperation, and that's happening on a number of fronts, particularly within the closest allies. I'll leave it at that, sir.
Thank you very much. John Friedenberg.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, General Shea. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and share PACOM's perspective and my personal perspectives. This is yet another important conversation that we're having with our partners here, our mission partners, and it's really the academia, the industry partners, as well as the military partnerships and across the government as a whole relationships. It's these types of conversations that stir that innovative capabilities in all of us to achieve answers to these really complex challenges that we face in our national security challenges and to meet the complex challenges across the world. So I appreciate this opportunity. I wanted to start by providing some kind of maybe broad areas where I think that cyberspace operations enable us to achieve mission success. So my key enablers in and through cyberspace would be one, adaptability. And you may think I'm talking about our network or cyber, but I'm really talking about us. I'm talking about human adaptability. I can count many times as I read through my history of how countries or militaries successfully adapted their doctrine, tactics, techniques, and procedures to emerging technology. The machine gun, the tank, the airplane, and now we're adapting to cyberspace, if you will, in general, and we're adapting to it as a warfighting domain where we are not only providing services and networks and decision-making, but we're achieving effects through the cyber domain. Our ability to not necessarily change technology just to make us do what we're already doing better, but how do we adopt, how do we get really innovative and change the way we do things to leverage the opportunities this technology provides. Again, that's the ability to stay ahead of our adversaries. That's something that happens with the people that are in this room, and to include the future generation with all the JRTC students that are here, that will be the next generation that will have to help us solve these problems as we move forward. The second attribute, and General Shea, you alluded to it, is I believe that the cyberspace arena will allow us to maintain decision superiority. The key enabler of our IT systems was to speed up our ability to work through the observe, orient, decide, and act, and do that at a pace that's better, make better decisions quicker than our enemies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. This is maybe an advertisement. So at 10:15, there will be another panel in here to continue this conversation more in depth from our SIC side of the house across all of our components here in the Pacific Command. I think that decision superiority is absolutely critical. We have to understand, why we have the network, why we have this cyber domain, where it started, and those advantages. It's always been an advantage within our free societies to be able to make decisions. We feel the freedom to make decisions. We're not waiting for somebody to tell us what to do. So how do we leverage information technology in the cyber domain to help us see more clearly, understand quicker, and make decisions that are less wrong than our enemy? That's the key. Probably the third attribute would be resilience, and we've talked a lot about that, and I agree with several of our panel members as we discuss through this. There's many ways to build resilience in the network, and it's not just one thing. And I would say we've made a lot of progress in redundancy. We've made a lot of progress in putting sensors on our network. We've made some progress in just increasing our computing capability, our capacity, and even our bandwidth connectivity. Where we really, really need progress, and again, this is across the layers, the networks, the services, the data, and the security. We can't afford to protect everything everywhere. We will go broke doing that. And so how do we identify those critical functions that need to happen? And how do we identify the critical cyber terrain? And how do we sort through the information that all these sensors are providing to us and turn that into knowledge with some type of analytics, and even to include some, as we emerge into this artificial intelligence, again, to help us make these decisions quicker. And when I say make decisions quicker, I'm talking about that helps us in all domains. And we have to remember that cyberspace is an operational domain. We're also making decisions in the cyberspace domain and have to stay ahead of our adversaries in that as well. We need the ability now, the way I see forward is the ability, I call it full cyber maneuver. But how do you detect, and then how do you contain information space or cyberspace that you need to perform your critical mission functions, threat-based, operations-focused, in order to achieve. If I just need to hold on to some critical cyber terrain in order to enable an operation, the information to flow or the effects to happen, and how can I hold that space? How can I build the capability in my network to have that dynamic, pre-settings or ability to block, tackle, contain, and then reconstitute? And I would say we need, in infantry terms, a final protective, fire. When you're in a defense and you're about to get overrun, you have a final protective fire. What is that thin line? What are the minimum things I need to do, and how can I ensure that that's protected at the time it needs to be protected? Again, threat-based, operations focused to enable operations. We don't have that full cyber maneuver capability. We're just getting to the point, again, redundancy, sensors, we need to turn that into information, and then we need to provide the capability to be able to do that blocking and tackling in order to ensure our cyber domain is there when we need it. The fourth would be interoperability. So again, it goes back to the mission. What do we need our network for? We've been making a significant progress in communicating within our services better, extending our service networks. We're making progress in the joint arena. We say we have to build that in. We really need to build in the ability to interoperate with our mission partners. I can't tell you how important our allies and mission partners are around this globe. We will go nowhere without them. And so why do we build networks that have, just separate, and I'm talking about the tactical and operational level. We train, man, and equip our forces on SIPR network. SIPR is inherently not releasable. That's a domain that we're not going to connect with anybody. Why would we do that? That's not how we fight. We fight as a joint force. We fight as an allied and coalition force. And so we really need to relook at what the purpose of our networks are at our tactical and operational level and ensure they're going to meet those needs and the capabilities that are required. And I think Mr. Halverson mentioned it during his comments. We are overprotecting our information, and it's part of our policy. It's releasable information, tactical and operational level information. When you're in a fight, is perishable relatively quickly. We can strip off, sources. We can do all kinds of things to put the information required for the operators to conduct their operations. We really need to relook at our policy and requirements at that level to ensure that we're able to interoperate with our mission partners. The last one would be we deliver effects in and through cyber. So it is not just an information network, it's an operational domain. We deliver non-kinetic effects synchronized with other operations and other kinetic effects in this domain in order to achieve our overall objectives and campaigns, both operational and strategic. And so this is critical. And the last thing I would say, we live in the information age, we live in the digital age. So getting back to that adaptability, again, General Halverson alluded to this, but from an operational standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, what is really key in diplomacy to prevent wars is when you live in an information age, information is key, right? That is important. So as we're in our diplomacy effort, which we are right now in this theater, we have a very unpredictable adversary in North Korea. How are we going to prevent a kinetic war from happening? We're going to prevent that by winning on the information front. We're going to prevent that by joining with our allies and partners and establishing those international rules of law and standards and enforce those. And much of that happens in the information domain. And cyber is an avenue to deliver that. The truth, trusted information. How do you leverage that in and through the cyber domain? So those would be some of the key kind of overarching attributes. And we can talk in depth through some of the questions about the how we would do that. And I've alluded to a few of those aspects and attributes with how to get after that. And I'll close there, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Back in May of 2010, I believe it was, Secretary Gates declared that cyber was a domain, and that's kind of the thrust that has been adopted across many countries, across many agencies. The provocative question is, or kind of one of the things I'm starting to think about is it cyber the domain? Or is cyber the enabler, the enhancer, and is information or decision-making or command and control, more specifically from a military perspective, is that the key? And so I'd just like to hear some quick thoughts about that. Andrew?
Yeah, I'll start, sir. I fully agree with what you're saying. Information is the domain. Cyber is just one element of that. I mentioned us standing up an information warfare division. It comes under a new joint capability group within the Australian Defence Force. So we essentially have created a fourth service. Even though us joint guys aren't wearing different uniforms, we are still managing that as a joint capability. Of course, you can't manage information without the cooperation, the engagement, the discussion with the services as the capability managers. But by standing that up as a domain and having a capability manager looking after it in Australia, I think we're going to get a far better attention to those joint enablers, those glue capabilities that I think in the past have been neglected.
Anybody else like to comment on that?
Thank you. Yes, cyber is a domain,
And we need to remember that it is different from physical domain, where the issue of anonymity is not, well, it's not an issue, okay? And also in cyberspace, there is no boundary between the combatant and non-combatant. So it will make difficult for, how can I say it? I suppose it will make the operators or it is difficult to counter, because we need to remember, or we need to know who to counter, who to attack, because of the problem of anonymity. But back to the question, yes, cyber is a domain.
Yeah, in terms of whether this is enabler or enhancer to some conventional war, yes, the basic line is that too. But when the target of this cyber warfare is audience or people itself, not systems or weapon systems, then it can be independent operations also. For example, psychological operations using information warfare, in the case itself has his own operational purposes. So you can say the cyber warfare can be an enabler or enhancer of the conventional war, but also it can be independent operations too.
Okay. General Friedberg?
So I look at it like this. I think cyber is the domain. I think the information, and as I've come, is the element of power. So when you look at our big, those of us in the whole of government approach that have been schooled on that, you have your diplomatic, your information, your military, and your economic elements of power. I think we can leverage the cyber domain to deliver, that information element of national power.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask one final question, then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. We've got some questions in the back now. We place a lot of emphasis on technical solutions. We talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things of that nature. Have we underestimated the human factors issues, the things that we can control, things like configuration management of the network, holding people accountable for what they do, making sure responsibilities are properly laid out? For those in the military, you all know if you're a battalion commander and you lose a rifle, there's a problem, right? You lose a weapon, there's a problem. We don't seem to have established that same level of accountability. But there's a lot of things from a risk management, from a human factors perspective. It's education, training, and I could go on through a whole list of things. It's how we acquire the system. Are we placing enough emphasis there and hoping that the Holy Grail comes down on the technical side?
I think we need both increased human awareness, increased accountability. I think the US is actually doing better than you're portraying there, sir, with its cyber worthiness regimes, some of the human awareness regimes that the US DoD does. We're trying to follow and undertake a similar sort of regimes to increase that human accountability. But at the same time, with the speed at which cyber events can unfold, you need far greater automation in order to keep up with the agility that General Friedenberg discussed.
Thank you.
Okay, cyber is still operated and controlled by humans. So the role of human beings play an important role in controlling and operating cyber. And when we have a look at, when we see, or when we heard Israeli children, for example, they need to be well equipped in using or operating cyberspace, cyber weapons, and so on. it informs us that cyber is still operated and controlled by humans. And humans beings still need to be aware of information warfare and how to counterattack the information warfare, for instance. Yes.
Human factors through technology, I think there are two perspectives. Okay? The cyber warfare is actually handling information. So for the terms of information handling, there are two things. One is the release or the availability of information is totally governed by human beings. So you cannot control the technology about the release of availability information actually, through the inside or outside. But in terms of also providing information to the enterprise, the technology also is important too. So altogether, so cyber operations can be done by interdisciplinary approaches. Human factors nowadays is very important. So also in academia, we put together psychologists also in cyber domains.
So I think we're moving in the right direction. I do think we're moving slowly. I do not think, I think we have a long way to go from a readiness perspective to meet a peer adversary at speed, at the intensity that we project that we're going to be operating in and through cyberspace. I think we've been spoiled. We have not had to face a peer adversary in the cyber domain yet. And so to me, this goes back to readiness. I believe we have steps to make in accountability, training, and understanding. It gets back to my comment about human adaptability to this new terrain. We have a generation that's emerging that are digital natives that are going to be much better at this than we are. But they'll have their new set of problems, you know what I mean, as they emerge. And there'll be another generation behind them that will be even better. But we need to increase our accountability. We need to also make it technically easier to meet those standards. We can't put the burden on the humans. We have to leverage, again, the technology that we're building in order to meet these security standards without having to rely on the human. How easy can we make? We make apps so that it's much easier for humans to take advantage of the technology. How do we build, on the backside of this network, those security measures that don't always rely, on the human, very endpoint of the network. And so I do think we're moving in the right direction, but we have a long way to go.
Okay, Terry.
Thank you, sir. First question comes from one of the ROTC students from Waipahu, and General Friedenberg mentioned that we must act to stay ahead of our adversaries. Are we truly ahead of them? And if so, what can we do to go beyond our current capabilities?
Is that for me, sir? So, I think, and again, I use the peer. There are some. We have some peer adversaries out there. We used to say we had near peer adversaries, but now I think you're hearing, across the department, the term near is being dropped from. Again, these are large nation states that have been watching us for the last 10, 15 years and learning and looking and studying us, looking for what our Achilles heel is. And one of the distinct asymmetric advantages we had was our ability to leverage the network. And they've been watching that. So through, advent in electronic warfare capabilities and other cyber-related capabilities, offensive capabilities, they've achieved parity with us in many areas. But we have significant advantages in many places as well. So I wouldn't say that that we're at the point where we're worried. What I'm worried about is the pace of technology change. We've been fighting and training for conflicts that I don't think are going to be reflective of the conflicts that we face in the future. And so what I believe is it's time now to take a long-term look at our investment strategy and maintain our level of readiness and capabilities so that we don't have to sit here and say we have adversaries that are ahead of us. That's the position we don't want to be in. And it's going to take the collective audience here and the good old-fashioned, innovation of free societies to make that happen.
Anyone else want to take a shot at that?
Yes, actually, I'll add one more thing here, actually. Usually, it can think of who is better, whose capability is better than others. But in the cyber domain, I think it's not the right question. Okay? Do you ahead of the adversaries? It depends. It's because cyber domain is also another asymmetric combat. For example, once hacker attack others, then the target is actually another hackers. It's the systems. So the power of attack actually determined by himself and also determined by vulnerability of the systems. So in open society, you have lots of things to protect. So, for example, in US, you have lots of things. It's open societies, so many systems. So you have many things to protect it. Okay. So there's also vulnerability in terms of other hackers. So comparison between hacking between US and, for example, North is not right questions. So who has more vulnerability makes the capability, the relative capabilities. Okay. So the question here actually, you can say yes if you invest more money to protect your systems here, but not improve the attack capability between compared to other countries, I think. Okay.
Andrew?
I certainly wouldn't speculate on the first question, but on the second question, I'd just offer a couple of things. One is to keep updated on technology and risk mitigations on your systems, and I'll just highlight one very valuable resource. I think it's a valuable resource. There is a list of mitigations on our national security agency's website, www.asd.gov.au. That's our Australian Signal Directorate. They list some excellent mitigations on cybersecurity that just doing simple things like patching and other things can better protect your systems. The other thing, and General Friedenberg's already mentioned it, is readiness, readiness, readiness. We are not doing it enough. Even when we've got the technology to provide us with that defence, we don't practice it enough. I am aware of one particular situation in a sophisticated country's network in which an attack was realised, and the thing that stopped was the decision making. Waking up the person who had to make a decision about containerising or isolating systems. If we don't practice those things, if we don't have procedures that we use to defend a significant event, when it actually happens, we won't be prepared.
I just want to add, states are the most capable and highly funded potential adversary. And in order to do this, international cooperation is imperative. But it is not easy because states have different perspectives on cyber sovereignty, for instance, on cyber espionage or cyber coalition. And it is also difficult because allies, even though, how can I say it? Basically, you can't trust anyone. Project Rahab, for instance, the German spy on its own allies. So it is not easy. But so what we can do to go beyond our current capabilities, first is international cooperation. It is important. But then we need to have our own strategy to deal with these problems that I just mentioned. Yeah.
Well, I'll say something that's a little bit controversial here, and that's fine. But I think if you look around and you see what's going on in terms of the infiltration, and that may be a bad word, but that's the word I'm going to use, infiltration of international standards groups and associations and those bodies, if you look what's going on there, I think that gap is really being narrowed. We've, from a United States perspective, we've certainly lost a lot of our influence there. Look at the ICANN, what has happened there. We've given that away. So we're really losing some of the influence and control. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not happy about it, so that's kind of the way I look at it. If you look at investment in Silicon Valley, if you look at investment in Hollywood, a lot of these things, a lot of these capabilities we've had is kind of moving away from us. So I think it's something we need to pay attention on. So that gap, in a lot of ways, and the ability to influence what's going on, the world is changing. We got to figure out how we're going to adapt to that. Next question.
The panelists all seem to stress reactive capabilities against uncertain threats in tight time windows. How can we build capabilities and processes to account for the presence of cyber threats and get ahead of this reality?
Anita, you want to try to take that one on?
Okay. From the perspective of political scientists, okay, number one, yes, we need to have state relations, cooperation in diplomacy. And then another one, states have to have offensive and defensive capabilities. And states have to be able to punish the adversaries, or in other words, adversaries must face a penalty. And states have to have the means and will to attack or to counterattack, of course, within the legal restriction. And also, one important thing is that state must have at least a geopolitical symmetry with its adversaries in order to have an effective cyber deterrence. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd actually suggest that the primary tackling and blocking activity that we do, the patching of our systems, etc., is that proactive work. It's 90% of the work that we do. It's against recognised, known threats. When we do have to react against uncertain threats, I think the reason why we stressed that is because that is the real danger, is being the subject of a day zero attack. We're all hoping that someone else gets the day zero attack. We learn from it and patch our systems before it gets to us. But if our own systems are the subject of a day zero attack, that is the most dangerous threat. So that's why we're stressing it. The only thing that I can suggest that we do there is greater sort of investment in research and development against those threats. And if I can be slightly controversial, perhaps greater cooperation between those agencies that are more aware of those sorts of threat vectors and the defensive security agencies, then that would allow us to be aware of some of those uncertain threats. Over.
Yeah, and I would agree with that last comment. I think we've got, we can still protect our methods and sources and do a better job of sharing information and increasing the awareness of what's going on out there. Anyone else want to take a shot at that? Okay.
What strategies would you recommend to accelerate innovation and allow the government to keep pace with the security technology being developed and deployed in the private sector?
So these are million-dollar questions that you all are asking us up here. If we had the answers to those questions, we wouldn't necessarily have to have this conversation. You know, we've talked about this a little, but you know, we look at, you know, what's the catalyst for innovation? There's folks around the globe looking at what's happening out in Silicon Valley, and you know, we have now a DoD element, DIUX out there. How do you allow this innovation to take place, you know, unhindered by government, you know, regulation and acquisition, this and that? That's a key question. Our hierarchical, you know, governmental policies, processes, and procedures are not able to keep pace with the pace of technology innovation right now. And they are being looked at, and again, this is about our ability as humans, right, to adapt to this new age, this changing age that we live in. And we haven't done it, we are hesitant to change. And sometimes we're risk averse. You know, when you look at what industry does to stir innovation, they have 10 failures, abysmal failures, for every one success. But that one success is game changing, and it takes off like a rocket. Are we willing to take taxpayer dollars and have 10 failures for every success? Is that something we can accept as a society? Can we take that level of risk? Or can we have 5 failures for every success? How much risk are we willing to take to be nimble and aggressive in this area and keep pace with you know, the innovation? Because, you know, if you pick an unsuccessful method of technology and you pay, you know, billions of dollars to implement it throughout your government or throughout your force, that's a significant event to overcome. And so I think there's a balance of that we can find in there that will enable us to take some risks, speed up, learn from what's happening in the private sector, apply that with some prudence, you know, risk-reducing policies, limited, and then be able to accelerate, and then if you're going to fail, let's fail very early, right? Before we get into major, you know what I mean, investments and deployments, before you can't turn back. The other thing that I find happens in my experience, at least in the DoD, is people hate to be on a loose. We will continue to put money in something that doesn't have a very good outlook. We'll just keep throwing money at it. That's not a good, we just need to accept a sunk cost. Business does it all the time. Accept a sunk cost and move on to something else before we just throw, you know, good money after bad. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the large bureaucracy that we work in to streamline those efforts and effects. There's a lot of work gone into that, but this is the human dimension of how we can change to adapt to the new age.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
I'll just give a quick comment. I think in respect of my department, my country, we have very good relationships with the security companies, but not with the other vendors, the Ciscos, the Microsofts, as far as keeping pace with technology. We've been able to survive in the past by changing our operating system, you know, 5 years after everyone else has. When we're about to get onto Windows 10, when that happens, we need to be able to do this with Microsoft and with our other vendors, because our operating systems will be updated or will fall out of support every few months. And so this is a very good question and something that we've got to pay attention to.
Okay, one more question, and then I'm going to ask the panel to wrap up briefly, and then turn it over to you, Terry.
What cyber threat concerns you the most?
I think for me, I've already answered that one. It's the day zero attack, the one that we're not expecting.
Yes, I agree with you. And something that we do not expect, for example, earlier I said about cyber terrorism, some might say, well, it has not caused terror. Yes, it hasn't, but it can be in the future. I don't know.
In my case, I concern about disinformation. Because actually, when you make decisions, you based on your information available, but sometimes, especially nowadays, information you have is not trust anymore. So you have to check whether this information is trust or not, okay? So I mostly concerned about misinformation and disinformation that I have. Okay?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Brigadier General Shin. I think the one that I'm concerned about the most is the one that changes reality. And that is the most scary. I mean, they can take money, they can, you know what I mean, deny me some access to a machine or you know, power, but the one that changes reality, the things that we're seeing that are happening in the influence of elections globally through cyberspace, leveraging some of the abilities and forums that we have out there, that is the scariest one to me.
Okay, thank you. How about a 30-second, 1-minute wrap-up on any final thoughts that you might have, please? Go ahead, Andrew.
I'd just like to thank everyone for their attention and for their questions. I would like to reiterate this need for preparing the human element, our people, for the possibility of significant cyber events and to embed it in our training.
Thank you for your questions. And I just want to make one more comment about cooperation. And this time it's about cooperation between non-state and state actors, where information can be construed by non-state actors over-classified. I do not know whether it is over-classified or not, but there are several elements that we need to remember. There are insider threats. This is one of the threats. And as I said earlier, spying on allies. And different states have different perspective on cybersecurity, information warfare, and how, whether or not the information is classified or not. Yes, sorry.
Here you have a junior ROTCs. I like to say that security is not product, it's a process. So you must have insight. When you have something, you have to insight that what is this? In information warfare, it's so difficult. So we all actually have to invest to the young citizens to identify what is this on their hand. It can be done by training. Okay? I think you can do something more than this.
So I thank you very much for your attention, but more importantly, thank you for coming to this conference. Thank you for being part of the discussion. As I opened, I think it's critical that the people that are here, and I think Lieutenant General Fenton said it in his comments, but this team work between the government, industry, and academia is extremely powerful. And I'm very optimistic. We have been in situations like this before, and we have always excelled, achieved, overcome, and adapted our way through these significant challenges that we face. And I'm confident that we're going to do that again. I have no doubts in my mind. And he gave us all a challenge. And when I left that, I heard some people discussing, but I appreciate you accepting the challenge to ride what he called the wave of consequence and make this the conference of consequence. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the panel. I think you've seen a diverse panel. I mean, it's across the theater, representatives across the theater here. They've traveled a long way, and they've done a great job in kind of helping to shape this issue that's going to continue to be a topic that's going to drive us for a long time. And we're morphing into this concept, and in some ways it's back to the future with information warfare. It's going back to integrating a lot of the things that we've done in the past and known in the past and skills that have atrophied over time. But really, it's been a diverse panel, but I think there's been a lot of common views and a lot of common understanding here. There may be some things where the emphasis will be put in a little bit different place, but I think that you can see the common threads of this panel. And I'll leave you with one final thought, and that is a quote from Secretary Rumsfeld, and in this case it applies to the cyber world, and that is there are knowns, there are unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. And I would argue that we are not seeing the A team and the B team. So just be cautious and be aware of that. I mean, we're having challenges right now, but I'm convinced that we're not seeing the A team and the B team. And I'll leave it at that. And one final thought for those that are interested in cyber education and cyber training, FCA is going to be hosting a conference down at Fort Gordon, Georgia, in January 17th to 18th. It's going to focus on the training and education and research aspect of cyber. So you're welcome to come, and we'd encourage you to come. Thank you all for coming, and again, I want to thank the panel for their participation and sticking with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending. The next and final panel will be the J6 Cyber Resilience and Assured C2 discussion at 10:15 here at the South Pacific Ballroom. The ticketed breakfast is available. Morning grinds will be served in the Coral lobby and the ballroom. Thank you very much.